This is the Open University.
But beware, this is not the real Open University, but a synthetic and mendacious Open University devised by Momus, a Scottish electronic folk singer.
I'm floating down the Kyoto River today, and it's the cheapest way to get through the Keihanshin area, the three cities of Kyoto, Osaka, Kobe. It's also the most direct way. It goes from Lake Biwa through Kyoto, where it's called the Uji River, and it becomes the Kyoto River and empties itself into the Osaka Bay. And that's an urban region which is second only to Greater Tokyo's population of 35 million or so. Here we have about 19 million. And here we have a lot of ruined arcades like this one, which is actually called the Keihan Top Shopping Street and is completely abandoned and just has national flags. And this is one of the reasons you might take this journey down the river, is that things are a bit more run down and cheap. Like, look at this papier-mâché kumamon hanging from the Ukuno Shotengai in Osaka. Or you might want to go to, the Shinsekai region of Osaka and walk down the Dobutzenmai arcade. Or Koreatown. This is us visiting Osaka recently and finding a rather charming old children's 45 record in a second-hand shop. This is a lady in the Korean neighborhood down near the canal. This is a cafe actually called Coffee Tiger, where they had copies of Relax magazine, and I started chatting to the owner and told him that I'd had a few pages in Relax magazine back in 2001. He actually tracked down the exact copy of the magazine and ordered it the next day, and then made an Instagram post about it. Charming man. We've been studiously avoiding the expo, although a friend, Lucien Moriyama, came to town and went to see it on our behalf. Not on our behalf, but saw it so we didn't have to, and came back with reports of it. He's quite interested in failed expos, and so I think on that level it worked. It worked as a failure because there are too many insects and too many queues, basically. This is almost the classic picture of the geisha with the cell phone. We have a laundromat geisha on the right-hand side. And we don't like anything that's too popular, basically, because we're hipster snobs. So we avoid a lot of Kyoto landmarks, which obviously, I might have seen in the past. And what we like is kind of abandoned temples and sort of neglected shotengai and shrines and things like that, the things which have no people. And there are plenty of those, actually, even in Kyoto. You just have to walk sort of randomly, look out of the train window and see an area that looks interesting. That is us sitting on a kind of platform. It looks like we're actors, but it's actually a cafe called Cafe.S, which has a car in it, bizarrely enough. There was also a glimpse there of an exhibition poster for someone called Eriko Mukai, who's an artist from Osaka, 10 years on from graduation, and she had a performance kind of show in the one of the museums. This charmingly innocent-looking book is called First Camping Trip by Akiko Hayashi. This is an amazing book, actually, called Yokai no Shima by Charles Fréget, photographs Monster Island, which I found in the Tsutaya up near the Heian Jingu Shrine. And these are kind of folk costumes, folk monsters, which he photographed in 2016. It came out first in Britain. Thames and Hudson released it, and this is the Japanese edition. And his name has been getting smaller and smaller on the book. I think they're seeing it now as just something which they own. A kind of August Sander documentation, full-body documentation of their folk costumes from various festivals. We've been seeing quite a few street matsuris and festivals. Costume is slightly less interesting than these ones, I have to say, though. There is a yokai street in Kyoto, a sort of monster street, which we stumbled on pretty much by accident and saw the little plaster monsters. I think that's coming up later in the slideshow. The video before last, I went to the Kyage incline and found David Bowie's house. So I did finally go up to the top of that hill and see what had been actually David Kidd's house, which turned into David Bowie's house. And finally, here it is. We're on the hill and we found Togendo. This was the wall that surrounded the now demolished building where David Kidd used to live, and David Bowie came to visit and thought about living, but didn't, back in 1979. This is the line, the doors of the train on that line. These orange doors are actually on the Tozai line at Kyage Station. And this is a food chain called Mr. Young Men. I always think it would be nice to have an album called Mr. Young Men, especially if one's not a Mr. Young Man. This is a climbing frame outside a cafe called the Walden Woods Cafe, which is very Instagrammable. It's got a bare room with seating around the edge of the room and a sort of dead tree in the middle, which people just sit and stare at. These dolls are actually from an exhibition, a Ningyo exhibition. These are the folk dolls that they have in Japan at the Kyoto Arts and Crafts University Gallery. And here we are back in Osaka. You can see that by the yellow Super Tamade bag. Super Tamade is a famous budget supermarket chain which exists only in Osaka. And here we are in an arcade that's dangerously close to the Tobita Shinshi area, the Ano Maroshe Shotengai. And we're looking again for the grunge, I guess. This is the Sakai Tsuji, which is one of the metro lines that goes through Osaka. And it's had a facelift in the Dobutsen station, which is that they've kind of covered most of it with cladding, but they've left these little windows to show you the old animal tiling, because people loved those so much. You can't just cover those up. So that's some monkeys. And some coloured tape, and my usual photographic fetishes. These are buildings in Kobe, and this is the Kitano district, which is up the hill in Kobe. We walked around on a sunny but windy day up there. The Western-style buildings from a century or so ago are a novelty in Japan. Any buildings that old are a novelty, because most has been demolished. There's a general picture of Kobe. Back in Kyoto, we actually missed a Cornelius Yellow Magic Orchestra tribute, which is a real shame, because it was being held in an amazing Brutalist building called the Kyoto International Conference Center. Cornelius himself had seen on the blog of Forever Records in Osaka that I was in Kansai, and invited us with free tickets. And we got the date wrong because he'd sent the email after midnight and said it was tomorrow, but in fact it was today. So unfortunately we didn't get to meet up with him this time. We did just wander around places like the Damachi Yanagi Shotengai, Teramachi, quite a bit, walking up there to where the river divides, the Kamo River divides in two. There's another, talking of Brutalist facades, there's another amazing facade, which is the gymnasium of the Kyoto University. And we ended up going a lot to the canteen of Kyoto University because the food was incredibly cheap, and they also have parfaits, very nice parfaits, which are also incredibly cheap. And these canteens are open usually to non-students, and you can just go in there. There's some sort of old men who go in there and chat away at the Art and Crafts University, for instance. They're doing community outreach, and we're part of that community. So if you want to avoid the tourist scalpy prices, go there. The University Museum across the road is actually also a good thing to see when you're at the Kyoto University canteen. One of the things we've been searching for is the Uwabaki gym shoes, which you would have worn in the Kyoto University Sports Gymnasium if it weren't demolished. But they only go up to a fairly small size, so I was always looking for the maximum size of 28, which just about works for my feet. but it's very rare because most dealers only stock up to like 25, 26. One of the day trips we did was the world's largest Muji south of Nara at Kashihara, and it's 8,000 square meters of Muji retail. The world's largest, actually, last time we were here in 2023 was in Sakai, South Osaka, but it's now south of Nara. And whenever we go to Nara, we have to go to Masashichi, tongue twister, Masashichi Nakagawa Shoten, which is a Nara-based upscale kind of clothing and lifestyle goods store. And they have their flagship store at Nara. We also did a side trip to the Kurama Onsen. Not the onsen itself, but we took the forest walk across the hill to Kibune, which is famous for these restaurants which jut out over the rushing water. Very expensive, so we didn't actually eat in the restaurants, but us and a bunch of Chinese tourists risked walking around in bear country late at night. It wasn't actually late at night, but the signs say, if you arrive at Kurama, the signs say you can't walk across the hill because it's pitch black and extremely dangerous, which it isn't. I mean, it certainly isn't pitch black. And you see the odd sign saying this path is closed because bears were noted here in December of last year or something, but I don't think it's a great danger. More danger than probably from large mosquitoes and spiders and various scary insects. But the path across the mountain is guarded by a tengu, which is the long-nosed folk monster associated mostly with forests. We took another side trip to a place called Otsu in Shiga, which is the south tip of Lake Biwa, where my floating river begins, actually. And we saw some of the coast, because it kind of almost feels like you're on the sea when you look at Lake Biwa. And we saw some retail, and we did what we always do, which is we found a branch of Kura Sushi, which is the conveyor belt sushi chain that's everywhere and is incredibly cheap. And of course, also with the weak yen, even cheaper than usual. And we went out to Arashiyama as well, twice. I'm always slightly repelled by the tourists there. It just gets thicker and thicker on the streets with tourists. But actually, you just have to take one side street and suddenly they're not there anymore. It's a bit like Venice in that respect. So we took a side street and reached the Keifuku Randen tram line and got off kind of randomly and found this place for lunch called the Kinema Kitchen, which had prices which were half what you'd be charged in a restaurant in Arashiyama, and twice as tasty as well. And that was near the Toei Kyoto Studio Park, which is a big theme park devoted to the Toei Studios productions, with a lot of sets which have been used for countless famous productions, sets of old Edo villages and things like that. And we pretty much walked back into the city following railway lines and discovered this yokai street, the Taishogun Shotengai, it's called, pretty much randomly by walking back into the center of Kyoto from out there. Another side trip to Osaka, we found this place called Sloth Coffee Roasters in Nakatsu, which had this carpet tapestry thing of the Beatles' Abbey Road album hanging on the wall, which for someone of my generation is quite resonant. That was the first album I actually owned, as opposed to borrowing and not giving back, which would have been Revolver. We also went to the Itohen Gallery, which had an exhibition by Kumiko Hirota, Living and My Mind. It looked a bit to me like Cy Twombly, and the artist herself was there in person talking to visitors and chatted with us for a while. I also saw in their bookshop in Itohen, there was this book of Orotaichi talking about reincarnation, a book full of little interviews where people chose their favorite old folk book text, and he's interested in Buddhist cycles of reincarnation these days. Orotaichi, an interesting electronic musician who used to do sort of electronic tribal music, but now he's doing more and more folky music and bringing up a child. We also found a place called the Kita Nagaya Shotengai in Osaka. That's where there's an architected house which was on the front of my favorite architecture magazine, Shinkenchiku. This is a daruma near Kurasushi in Tambabashi, which is south of Kyoto. Basically, the kura sushis in the more suburban areas that take a bit of getting to because they're usually on busy roads rather than on train lines, but they have a much more interesting ambience. There is a very touristy kura on the main arcades in Kyoto, but we tend to avoid that. One of our favorite places to go is called Pet de Non, which means nun's fart, and that's located at Nowhere, which is a kind of complex of buildings in Hajino Sato, which is south Osaka, almost Sakai, or almost Nara actually as well. It's down where all the keyhole tombs are, mysterious imperial keyhole tombs. That's run by Sachiko, Pet de Non Sachiko, a friend who's married to the guy who used to organize all my live concerts in Kansai. He's called Tetsuya. So then, this is actually just pretty much yesterday now. Some furniture made by Mori Taitso in an exhibition at the Kyoto Art Center called Let's Put It Here for Now. And Mori Taitso was born in 1974 in Osaka, and I enjoyed sitting on his stools. So on our very last day in Kansai, we decided to go down to Uji. Noemi urged me to go to Uji, and I'd never been there in all my time in Kansai. Saw these, I think they're kaki persimmons at the station. And these are, I think, azalea petals scattered on the ground. This is some cormorants, which are used to hunt fish. They're wild cormorants, but they're used to catch fish, which are then kept in cages on the river at Uji. This is a cafe called Outstanding, which had a DJ booth, but we won't hold that against them. Everything was blue inside because they had blue plastic corrugated paneling. Very nice design. And your eyes adjust so much to the blue that when you step outside, everything seems pink. This is an Ua album. They had a lot of albums as sort of artwork up on the walls. This is me in my polka-dotted shirt and a view of one of the stations. Just randomly, it's certain combinations of colors are very Japanese. A nice piece of 70s architecture near Uji. This is the cab of an amazing cab, very textile heavy. A driver, commercial driver, a truck cab basically, but I thought it was so ornate and sort of opulent that I had to push the camera against the windscreen. Some plates wrapped up in a wholesale catering shop, a shop called Hori. This was actually back in Fushimi. We went into this traditional store and bought a crossbody bag, a kind of rice bag which they've adapted with semi-Marimekko patterns. And this is an arcade in that same Fushimi area, which we really love. This reminded me of Peter Saville, somehow. Some sleeve he would have done for orchestral maneuvers in the dark. Some plants, some wooden buildings. There are a lot of wooden buildings down there. And a cloud in the sky, and that's your lot. And I've enjoyed enormously this little trip. Living in Kyoto for an extended time, which I'd never done before. I'd lived in Osaka, obviously. But it's been an eye-opener, even to those of us with only one eye. And I think I'm going to swim back up the river now from Osaka to Kyoto, and maybe into Lake Biwa, although I've got a flight to catch on Thursday to back to Seoul for a few days, then back to Europe.
Open University. Now Bob Harris introduces this week's edition of the Old Grey Whistle Test.
Let's go back in time. The Momus album was recorded